So going forward, I think this is going to be our way to meet. I had a quick discussion with Tim, I think last week, back in the heady days of being able to get your hair cut and visit friends and whatnot in person. His suggestion was to have the chair go to the municipal center, um, and that we would put the meetings on, live TV from the boardroom and whatnot. But increasingly, that doesn't seem like a viable option as we go forward. And obviously, we've got to manage the FY21 budget. So this is going to be the way that we do it this year. Until further notice. So a couple of things. We are recording all of these. I'll take the recording, the file, it just puts a file together on your computer. So I'll send that over to the cable studio to make sure that the meeting is put on cable TV and up on YouTube so people have an opportunity to see it. Any votes that we take have to be roll call votes. So basically in a roll call vote, you just say your name and then how you vote, and Sue Fiacco will record the votes. If somebody's dialed in, or if a number of people are dialed in, we have to check in periodically to make sure that they are still participating in the conference. So I'm not sure exactly the cadence on that, but if I forget for whatever reason and we've got department meetings or longer meetings where I haven't checked in to make sure that certain participants are still on the phone, feel free to remind me. What I would ask is, if we have any audio issues, I'll just go ahead and mute everybody. And then if you want to speak or ask a question or whatever, just unmute yourself and you can make a comment. If you are on mute and you want to make a comment and chime in on something, feel free to raise your hand. I guess, just so that we can all see it, and I'll call people in to make commentary that way as well. So our agenda today, I'm going to shift it up a little bit. The first thing that I wanted to do was just go over the commentary from the select board meeting on 3/17. There were some concerns that I wanted to respond to, and that's the primary reason for this meeting. Next, I wanted to go to the FY21 budget, see how everybody's doing, and make any recommendations or suggestions based on how things are going and what's happened with the coronavirus response that we've had, and what's happened in the stock market and locally, and then discuss the override. So that's our agenda for tonight. The first thing that I wanted to just do is sort of outline some of the commentary that was made by the select board on the 3/17 meeting. So if I don't know, Sue, how I officially get the meeting started, but it's going. So if I had a gavel, I would have hit it on the desk. So there were a couple of things that I heard in the meeting. Was anybody not able to see the meeting?
I did not.
Okay. So the pertinent agenda item that is relevant to this meeting is that the select board, as one of their agenda items, took up approving the language for the warrant article that will go before town meeting relative to the override. And in that discussion, there was essentially, it opened up with some logistical timing commentary from Tim. He noted to the select board that they, in terms of legally, we have to sign the warrant by April 10th. And then he noted that obviously a lot's changed, and he questioned if now is the right time. And I'm not quite sure what that meant, but that spurned a whole discussion with the select board about the override. So a couple of things that came up. So there was the comment from the town administrator that he wasn't sure that it was the right time. There was some commentary from Ms. Stock that she was uncomfortable with the way the vote happened. She was looking for some additional community input. She noted that this might be a time for fiscal constraint. She was concerned about the future. And the thing that's most relevant to us, I guess, is that she was looking for some additional input from Finance Committee and School Committee. So what I would like to do is to provide some input from Finance Committee to the Select Board and the Town Administrator based on what's happened, based on what we know about the Grafton budget historically and what we know about it today. And then I would like to also provide them some input and direction in terms of Finance Committee's stance on the override. So that is what I'd like to do. Were there any other, and I think at least Doreen agreed with Donna's suggestion that they get some input. So really this meeting is to just, go ahead, Colleen.
The other comment that kind of stood out to me was when Ms. Thomas was saying she doesn't know what's going to happen. A lot of things could change and she doesn't know what's going to happen. And I feel like we do know what's going to happen, and that's why we put an override up, so we can at least address those issues still.
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, so there was a general feeling of uncertainty. It had the feeling of at least some of the members were starting to back away a little bit from an override, you know, that we had voted on. So so that I think, and the town administrator did ask for some direction, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of direction from the select board in that meeting, except for the fact that they wanted some input from other boards and committees. Go ahead, Irene.
My concern would be this. Do we have any sense of what's going to happen to town revenues?
So that's the big concern.
Huge.
Yep.
Not to mention, even if we believed our revenues were going to come in exactly as projected, which I tend to think is somewhat optimistic, what does that mean to residents? It's one thing to say, okay, we're going to somehow manage to get all this money in, but how many people in town are not working? And unemployment is great. It's a lifeline, but it doesn't replace 100% of salary. So I'll be honest, I'm concerned. I am concerned, A, that we'll have the revenue, period, even for the regular budget. And I mean, I know the need is there. I absolutely supported the override, but, and I'm working. I'm saying this as somebody who is right now still getting her paycheck. I'm very concerned about the sheer number of people that are not. And, you know, if this is over in 3 weeks, it's not maybe not going to be such a big deal. But if this goes on for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, you're looking at people that are losing, you know, in the case of 2 weeks, they're losing 15% of their income.
Sure. Okay. So I just want to wrap up I appreciate that commentary, and I absolutely would agree with most of it. I think, and part of the reason that we need to get together today is a recognition that things have changed a little bit, that some of our concerns, particularly on the revenue side, are now exacerbated considerably, based not only on local factors, but also on factors at the state level. So, was there any other commentary on that anybody wanted to bring up from the select board meeting? The only other thing that I will bring up as a final point that I noted was Ms. Stock mentioned that she wasn't sure that we would be spending all of the money, that there might actually be some, and I didn't quite understand that, but she said that she might see some positives in terms of the budget impacts in a recession type of year. So that's, so was there any other comments in terms of the meeting? Okay, so let's.
Barry has something to say.
Barry has something to say.
Oh, go ahead, Barry. Let me go to gallery view here.
My basic questions are related to what you've already said. I would like to know what is the current status of our revenue for this fiscal year. We get that management report, but that only shows, for the most part, expenditures. It does not show much in way of revenue. So I'd like to know, where do we stand on that?
Okay.
And what are the projections for the rest of this fiscal year for that? Because we know recreation is going to be down. I would guess the contribution that the police and building inspectors do, probably excise would all be down. I'd like to see a projection of that because that's going to impact what we have for fiscal 20. And fiscal 20 will also be impacted by, oh, now I lost my train of thought there. This is what happens when you leave the station. It would be a similar thing for fiscal 21. What are the projections? Because this is going to, the virus issue is going to still be running through July, August, September, probably. And I would like to see a probability estimate. It's what we used to do in corporate. I don't know for sure, but it's probably going to be 70%, 80%, whatever. I'd like to see that for all of the revenue items. You know what the expense items were going to be. And I think it would cover the department revenue, licenses and permits, and it should take a poke at what we might or might not get back from the state for Chapter 70, especially, as well as some Chapter 90. So those are facts that really should be in play so that we can understand what we're talking about. Otherwise, we're just kind of spitwadding.
Sure. Well, so I can certainly request the status of our current revenues from Anita, and I think that makes a lot of sense to inform us where we're at. When we talk about things like excise tax, we've collected a lot of the excise tax already.
Mm-hmm.
So the impact on excise tax is it's a little bit forward-looking. The impact on excise tax is the ability to collect excise tax, but it's also the fact that Tim banks on people buying new cars year after year, right? Which drives up the collective value of cars in town. And in times of recession like this, when people are at risk with their employment and whatnot, they don't buy new cars. So it's a tax collection issue, but it's also a forward-looking valuation issue. So that might not be something that hits necessarily right away, but as we fast forward this year and next year, that's when we would see the impacts of that sort of effect. And really, our meeting tonight is to not just think about FY20, FY21, but it's also to think about FY22, because as we think about the impacts of a recession on the state, the federal, and even locally here, often you get effects that happen over multiple years. So we want to be thinking about this long term, probably in the 2 to 3 year time frame in terms of what are the actions that Grafton needs to take right now to respond to what's happening and prepare ourselves for that future looking view, right? So that makes perfect sense. So I will ask Anita for that, and hopefully she'll be able to get that for us. I don't think it's likely that we will get our confidence-based projections. I've never seen anything like that in Grafton, and I think that would be really challenging. What we can ask for, though, are what are the basic assumptions, and how is the town administrator and the select board thinking about our revenues today, and what the impact on those revenues are going to be moving forward. And I think that's a reasonable ask to inform our commentary back to them. So any other thoughts on FY21? Barry?
Yeah, one last thought. Whatever shortfalls we have for fiscal 20 could probably be pulled out of what we define as free cash. But if we do that, doesn't that have an impact on what we're doing in the October town meeting with any other changes or modifications in our spending?
It absolutely does.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I think Tim, my opinion, Tim has already pulled a couple of his budget levers this year that he doesn't in an up year, because we ended up being constrained in terms of revenue compared to what we need to provide level service. So, for example, he pulled the police cars out completely out of the budget, and he's expecting the chief to just get by with cars that are getting older. So those are going to have to be covered next year, right? We replace two out of the fleet every single year, and that keeps them in the rotation where they don't get too many engine hours. So, you know, the reality of it is a few items like that have already been executed, and, you know, that spending is just delayed to next year. We're not actually saving much money with that. It just helps us balance the budget for this year. So we have a fair amount of that going on. Any other commentary on FY21? So I think from my perspective, one of our goals should be to try to do everything that we can to preserve as many of the existing positions as possible. I went back and I looked at what happened in 08, 09, and I think that is, you know, if we look at historical context, that is the best information that we have to look at in terms of historical context. So there were two items that I noted from looking at the DOR, DLS information. State aid, Chapter 70, Chapter 90, and other forms of state aid dropped about $570,000 between 08 and 09. So I think that is something that we should see equivalent to that. I can unmute you, Eric. You're unmuted, Eric. Your mic isn't on.
Yes. No.
Nope. So you can type comments into the chat. So our state aid dropped $570,000. The other thing that happened is our uncollected taxes increased about 80,000. The other thing that I'm aware of that definitely is going to drop, and it's difficult to say by how much, but we definitely will have some impacts in terms of meal tax.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer.
Can you guys hear me now?
We
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
Both of you.
Yeah, so I talked to Matt about this. My only comment, that wouldn't duplicate what other people have already said, is, you know, I think the state aspect of all this is really going to be critical when you talk about revenue. So, you know, I guess my advice, like what I would advise the select board on is, like, I think like Mike and Dave need to be in every single meeting going forward, because they're going to have the most, and that's Senator Moore and Representative Meridian. They're going to have the most up-to-date information at the state level in terms of like where this is going to go, because that state and local aid, that $10+ million, that's, I mean, we're screwed if that significantly goes down. So I understand the select board's hesitance about like override right now, because we don't know what real revenue is going to look like. But I would say, the first thing we need to do to have any idea on that stuff is include the state level people. And I'm sure, Tim's talking to his other TAs. Mark, I don't know if you've heard anything, but that has to happen. That's all I got to say.
So I did invite Dave to the meeting. He said he was going to be able to make it, but I imagine that his schedule is probably changing daily, and it doesn't look like he was able to make it. But I did invite him, and I think we definitely need some input from Dave. And he's on the Ways and Means Committee, so I think we would have a reasonable shot at understanding what some of the revenue impacts might be from state aid. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, I spoke to my state representative today, and one of the things that she told me was that the state's rainy day fund is pretty solid, and that they were going to try to do everything they can to keep communities whole by dipping into that. At least that's what she told me. So I'm not exactly sure what the impact would be. I think we'll get all our FY20 money this year, because there's one more quarter to pay, and I don't see that being in jeopardy. It's what FY21 has to offer. But if they have to dip into the rainy fund to keep communities whole, I think you might see them do that.
Yep. That's good.
So Matt, if you're looking for advice to give to the select board for next year relative to the override, I don't think it's right that we had a tri-board meeting, tri-con meeting where everybody was there. And I know circumstances changed, but there was pretty significant support in that room to move forward with an override. And I think until the tri-con gets back together, I don't think the select board should unilaterally make decisions without conferring back with the school committee and the finance committee. So I'd like to send a message to the select board that I would like to be able to at least meet with them, whether it be through a Zoom meeting or whatever, before they make any final decisions for the next year. Because I think there's a lot to understand, there's a lot to see, there's a lot to look at before we make final decisions. So I would be in favor of letting the select board know that we don't want them doing anything until they get together with all of us before April 10th. That's
Okay.
my advice.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I do. So I think it definitely makes sense that, you know, we had quite a meeting at that tri-committee meeting, and then lots of stuff changed since then. So having, you know, another meeting, I think, makes sense. Generally speaking, though, I feel like, if anything, it's even more clear that we should go forward with an override. And if anything, I would think a larger number might be needed, just because we're looking at possibly having less revenue than we thought. We're looking at, and I know it's going to be more difficult for people to pay that, but I think there are things that the town could do on the other end of it when people are not able to pay their tax bill, to try to work with them. And you know, I think it's there's going to be a lot of people who are still going to be able to pay, and it's I just see that the need for the revenue is still going to be there, and possibly more.
So I think, yeah, I'm not sure necessarily that it's finance committee's role to advocate one way or another for an override, but I think what we can definitely say is, if we want to continue providing level service, that we will need additional revenue, and that we are likely to get less revenue from taxes, permits, fees, and state aid going forward. So we can reiterate that that's our continued position, and that we should discuss, you know, if there's a reconsideration of what we voted on in our last TRICOM meeting, then we should get together with that TRICOM body and reconsider that as a TRICOM body, because that, you know, we did have very strong consensus. We had unanimous support in that meeting, but the circumstances have changed. But I agree with what you're saying, Mark, that rather than a unilateral decision on the select boards, it's their purview to make a different decision if they want to do that.
I agree 100%. An override can only be put on the ballot by the select board, but
Yep.
they made their decision in conjunction with the school committee and the finance committee. And if they're going to change that decision, I think they need to sit back just to follow along with what's going on with the select board and the finance committee.
I couldn't agree more. Colleen.
I think Mr. Meridian did join the meeting, if we want to hear anything he might have to offer.
Hey, Dave.
Hey guys, how's it going? Sorry I'm late.
It's okay. Thanks for joining, Dave. I do appreciate it. So yeah, we're let's see. I guess I'm not sure how long you've been on.
Probably 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Maybe
All
not
right.
even.
So just to quickly catch you up, in our last TRICOM meeting, we voted to move forward with an override. That was on, I'm not
March 5th.
sure when it was, but yeah, March 5th. So that was school committee, finance committee, and the select board. That was
Mhm.
an override which represented level service for the schools, a couple of additional positions on the town side, building out the fire department with some 3 full-time positions, as well as $1 million a year for capital, to try to work some of that backlog down. There was some commentary in our select board meeting this week, or I guess it was last week. The time's going by pretty quickly, and they are uncomfortable, I guess, and looking for some additional input from finance committee and the school board, because of everything that's changed. So we're meeting tonight to really discuss what our recommendations to them would be and what our position would be in terms of the override and whatnot. Part of the discussion is really what should we expect from the state for FY20 and FY21 to the best of your knowledge.
Yeah, I wish I could give you a pretty clear path right now as to what might be coming down the pipeline, but this is just, with everything that's gone on, it's such an unbelievably fluid situation that
Sure.
basically in one kind of line, we're taking some guidance from the federal government, seeing what they're doing, and then on the other side, we're trying to be proactive and protecting everyone here in the Commonwealth. So with that, and I personally believe that we haven't seen the worst of this yet. I think it's going to get a bit worse before it gets better. And from that, obviously that affects, I think when I jumped on, you guys talking about taxes and things like that and the receipts and everything that you're going to be bringing in.
Yep.
Obviously that affects the whole Commonwealth for
Sure.
what's going to go on. I know the administration's done some things in terms of small business loans with barely any interest or none at all. I know there's been ideas bantered about on the federal government about loans that would be forgiven if it's going to overhead, to staffing and things of that nature. Unfortunately, you see that Washington can't really get around anything right now, which is so unbelievably frustrating given the circumstances that we have. So luckily, the last couple of years, we've been investing a whole heck of a lot of money into the rainy day fund. So we're over $3 billion there. Now, I don't know how much we're going to be tapping into that, but I'd imagine that when it's all said and done, we're going to try to tap into that just on the sheer aspect of not dipping below where we are in terms of any of the local aid, Chapter 70, unrestricted general government aid from the year before. That's just my best guess. That's not an insider knowledge to it or
Sure.
anything like that. But that would be my, that's at least what I think would come of this. I was thinking about it before while I was on the call with someone else and just trying to figure out, any type of a path or an avenue that we might be taking. But this is just, it's an ever-changing situation, not even just every day, but and sometimes every minute. When the governor had his press conference Sunday, I got called at 5:30 at night, kind of giving me a heads up as to what was going to be said. And literally at 6 o'clock, some of the things were different. That just shows you how fluid it is.
Yeah.
So I know that some individuals on the board have reached out to me about, the advocacy for funding and things like that. And trust me, I'm going to continue to try to do everything I can. It's just we have so much going on right now. I can't give you a definitive on any of it.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Well, that's really good information. So dipping into the rainy day fund, that would be for FY20 and 21.
Potentially, yeah. And listen, that's not something that's moving forward. It's just something that's on the table. There are
Of course.
so many conversations. We have tax relief packages that we're talking about. We're talking about, forgiveness, things like that. So, it's just, we got to get this, once we get through, obviously, first and foremost is the public safety and the health of everyone. But secondly, is we got to get this economy back and going strong, get people back to work. And, that affects everything that you guys were talking about right before, or as I was jumping on the phone call. You get the economy going again. We're going to start getting those receipts coming back in. Hopefully, before this, we were going strong. We were above benchmark. We were having a good year. Everything was looking good. So at this point, when we're supposed to do our budget, basically say a month from today, a little bit further than that, but a month or so from today, I can't envision any which way that we're doing it then. So it's going to be a scramble to get everything done. It definitely is. And so I'll try to keep you, Matt, or anyone else, I'll try to keep you all super in the loop. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'm trying to be as accessible as possible. But this is just a crazy, unprecedented time.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, I appreciate you joining the call for sure. Were we to have a more extended recession, would you anticipate issues going into FY22 in terms of state aid and whatnot? So if this was more, more extended than we had originally anticipated, I'm thinking back to, I did some research into 08 and 09, and state aid dropped significantly between those 2 years to the tune of about $570,000. I'm just wondering if we do have an extended recession, if that's something that we should be potentially preparing for.
I think to be prudent, you should prepare for everything.
Yeah.
And, trust me, I'll do everything I can to say that, we should put resources in there so at least you get what you had moving forward from last year. That being said, I don't know how long this is going to last.
Right.
And like we said before, it's going to get worse before it gets better. This could even be the tip of the iceberg. So it just, I think you being a very sound committee, I think that you guys, it would be prudent for you to just anticipate everything, much like you're doing with, override projections. And here's if we get everything, here's if we get half, here's if we get none. That's kind of, I think, how you should, that'd be my suggestion as to how you'd approach this.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's why we're meeting. The risk of not getting override revenue has just gone up pretty significantly, I think. And in order to provide level service, we're going to need that revenue. So, this meeting in part is really to discuss what happens if we don't get an override. What steps should we prepare to take to try to make our budget as sound as possible, based on the changing conditions and a fairly conservative understanding of what those revenues might look like. So it sounds like the guidance is think about a scenario where state aid stays level, doesn't increase, but doesn't drop. And I think that's great guidance. I know, that's not a commitment on your part, but that helps us a lot understanding what some of the numbers might look like from a state standpoint going forward. So thanks so much for that, Dave. And just
no problem at all. I think you should kind of look at three scenarios where you get kind of the minimum aid increase, which we've typically been kind of going through because of the whole factor reasons. I would look at kind of no increase, and then I'd look at a decrease. And it's just, those are all things just to keep in mind.
Yep. Okay. Dave, thanks also for all the work that you've been doing in the community. We've all been following along on Facebook, and I know you're real busy. So if you need to hop off, then feel free to. If you want to hang on for the rest of the call, you're more than welcome to stay as well.
I would love to hang on, but I've missed 3 calls since I've been on, so I'm going to
understand.
Continue to go return those. So, but listen, you guys know how to find me. If you have any more questions, if I can help you out, just let me know.
Representative Meridian, thanks so much. I appreciate you joining our call.
All right, guys, have a good night.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, that's the UK coming out. Cheers. Oh, most of my meetings are with UK colleagues.
Can I, Matt?
Go ahead.
I don't want to like stop Dave from leaving, but I have heard that there's a bill in going through the state legislature to give towns the option to delay their town meeting and approving their budgets. So that's, just something to keep in mind, that I don't know if that's passed yet. Well, I guess if it did, he probably would have mentioned it, but definitely something to keep in mind.
I got a thing this afternoon. I think that bill is before the governor to sign. It's going to allow for delays in elections and town meeting for the municipality. So I doubt we're going to have our town meeting on May 11th or our election on May 17th, whatever that date is. So I think we have time to do things. But I want to make sure we don't miss the deadline. So back to my original point before the representative got on. I'd like the Finance Committee to take a vote tonight to request that the Select Board not make any determinations before April 10th to respectfully request that the Select Board not make any determinations to change what they voted on March 5th until such time as they convene a meeting virtually or otherwise with the Finance Committee, Select Board, and School Committee. So I'll make that a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Well, okay, go ahead, Colleen.
Do we know when they're meeting again next? So we don't put a requirement on them that they might not be able to meet?
I would imagine if I read correctly, they're on their every other week schedule. So I'm going to guess their next meeting is going to be on March 31st.
Okay.
That's a week from tomorrow, right? Because they're not posted for tomorrow night. So I'd imagine I can't see them not meeting during this crisis. So, I mean, my board's meeting in about 30 minutes. So I would imagine this board needs to meet, unless they're just going to throw their hands up and do nothing. So I don't think that's possible, right?
I don't think that's possible, and we all voted as a TRICOM to put the warrant forward.
Yep.
So as far as I understand, we've had a vote, and so we're going to town meeting with an override unless something else happens.
Yeah. Somebody has to make a motion to reconsider the vote that they took on March 5th, and that did not happen last week. So they've got to follow parliamentary procedure.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Colleen.
So is Mark's motion asking that they don't reconsider until TRICOM has met?
Correct.
Yes. So, yeah. Any additional commentary on that? No more discussion. We have a roll call vote.
Haddad, aye.
Roy, aye.
Irene, aye.
Robbins, aye.
Barry, aye.
Often aye.
Tusher, aye.
Swenson, aye.
Let me just lose Heather.
She's on mute.
Sorry, my kids are being loud. Heather,
No
aye.
worries.
Did you guys hear me on that one?
Yep.
We did. Thank you. All right. Is that everybody?
Yep.
Outstanding. Okay. Is there anything else we wanted to send along in the way of input to the select board?
Well, I got one other thing. We have to prepare for anticipated cuts in revenue. Now, it sounds like the state's going to keep us whole. So in FY20, I don't think we're going to see any reductions in the budget. And if what Representative Moradian said and what my representative from Groton said, but they're going to use the rainy day fund to keep municipalities whole in FY21 as well. So I don't think we have any chance of seeing a reduction in state aid. It could happen, obviously, because he told us it's either going to go up, down, or stay the same, which that was pretty obvious. But I'm sorry.
That's kind of what I expected, but it's early.
I understand. So I think that we need to plan for some sort of reduction in revenues for next year as well. We're definitely not going to take in that $300,000 in whatever that marijuana money. I hope everybody understands that there's no way that's going to happen next year, right? I think that's pretty obvious.
Yep.
So there's a $300,000 problem. I think we're going to see a reduction in the meals tax because, while some of the restaurants are doing takeout, they're not getting the robust services that they've been doing. So those revenues are going to be potentially down if this thing lasts over the summer, because the summer is ordinarily a high month for collection. So I think we as a finance committee need to prepare for reductions in revenues next year and how that'll impact the budget if the override doesn't go forward and the select board decides not to move forward with that, which is a possibility. I hope they don't do it, but that is a possibility. So I think the finance committee needs to say to the select board as well that we're going to be working on various scenarios of advice to help the administration and the select board navigate through FY21 in the event they don't go forward or an override fails. That's what I would like to see us do.
Okay. I'd agree with that. Go ahead, Barry.
The issue of debt exclusion with the bond markets, even the bond markets sliding down. There goes my 401k. I would wonder if our banker can start renegotiating the interest rate we're paying on our existing debt and projected debt.
So that's something that happens all the time, Barry. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was going to say, when Colleen and I met with Amy, we asked that very question. And what Amy told us is they are monitoring that. You have to wait until you get through a useful life of the bond before you have to go like 50% of the debt before you can refinance it. So they're working with their financial advisor to do that. But most of our big debt is excluded. So even refinancing it, while it'll help lower taxes, which is good, it's not going to help operational expenses.
Right.
It actually would hurt operational, wouldn't it? Because it's still debt. You're paying principal and interest. Even though it's excluded, well, because it's excluded, you're not going to bring in as much in your net tax payment.
Well, it does. Yeah, but the point is it's not. It can't count towards operational expenses. So It's not going to help us. Excluded debt should not even be part of the discussion, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, lost me there, but okay.
Okay. I think that makes sense, Mark. Even though we're not talking about a drop in state aid necessarily, we are still talking about meals tax, excise, permits, fees. Potentially, as we think about go forward into next year, there could be impacts to new growth for sure. A lot of times development slows down in recession years. So depending on how long this goes on, there could be significant lingering impacts. And those are all things that we should be forward thinking about in terms of our budget. I have some concerns that if we do have some significant revenue challenges that we would need to be reducing positions going forward. So I think we as a finance committee need to be thinking about protecting those positions going forward, and things like I'm not sure now. This is the year to be giving people raises or introducing new positions, for example. So I think we do need to just run the numbers and kind of do what Dave Meridian suggested and Barry alluded to as well, as what's the scenario that we feel most comfortable with and most confident with based on what we know right now. I'm going to guess that we're going to have a little bit of additional time to work through the budget, because I am going to guess that we're going to push back town meeting and the elections. So given that we've got some time to kind of work through that, I don't think it doesn't make a lot of sense to trying to rush through the budget as it is, because everything's changed. The world's a little bit upside down at the moment, and I would rather be preparing for the upcoming couple fiscal years and thinking about it that way, rather than focusing on numbers that all of our assumptions are probably wrong at this point that we made going into the FY21 budget cycle. So, we can certainly ask what those assumptions were and how they've been updated. Things like meals tax. What do we actually expect? What does the town administrator expect to come in terms of meals tax? What is his assumption in terms of that revenue drop? And in those various areas. So we should be teasing that out. We should be working with the administration. We should be working with the school department to understand what that guidance should be going forward.
Yep.
So if you guys are okay, then I can just send a quick note off to the select board to let them know that we'll be working through those scenarios and we'll provide some guidance. We should give the school committee the opportunity to meet and to see what comes out of their meeting, and they'll need to rally back with the superintendent and their finance director, Dan Gale. So they're meeting tomorrow night. I think we need to give them a little bit of time to work through the different budget scenarios and impacts on the school system in terms of, I don't know what the impacts might be if there's an altered school year, for example, if they end up going to school for an extra year, or if they have to employ some remote learning tools that cost money, or we just don't know. And obviously they've been in scramble mode to try to figure out just how to provide meals for kids and educate them and stand up some of these remote learning opportunities. So I don't think they've had a real good chance to really process what's happening. So giving them a little bit of time, I think makes sense as well.
I agree.
Okay.
So Matt, are you gonna draft something and then send it to all of us to look at, or what?
It's up to the committee. If you guys are okay, then I'll just draft it and send it out, unless you guys want to have an opportunity to comment. I'm happy to do it that way as well. Go ahead, Mark.
I have faith, Matt, that you know what we wanted to say, and as long as you just copy us when you send it off, I'm comfortable with having
Of
you do
course.
it.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yep, ditto.
Got it. Okay. Any other commentary?
I think Barry had his hand up.
Barry?
Oh, I was just wondering if there was some impact now with the schools not being occupied. Are we saving money on energy, on lighting and heating?
Well, hopefully they'll turn money back at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Help us with the free cash in the fall.
I'll speak
Well-
to, at least with my experience with my district, which is Maynard. Our expenses, you might see some savings for utilities,
Yeah.
but right now, most of the schools are trying to full pay virtually all the staff for a large number of reasons. So there aren't going to be huge savings. Again, maybe some supplies, no one's there using toilet paper, copier, toner, that kind of stuff. But again, right now, most of the schools are looking to keep their vendors whole, like the bus companies, for example.
Oh, yeah.
The reason for that being, we need them there when we open again.
Right.
They lay off all the drivers, and shut down. They might not reopen. And now what do we do?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So-
I wouldn't anticipate that we would get any turnbacks anyways. They opened up their special education stabilization account, and the indication was that their funding source for that was going to be turnbacks.
Yeah, so again, I'm not anticipating there'll be some savings. There might be some, but no, it's unfortunately, or fortunately, depends how you look at it. This isn't going to result in huge savings just because the doors aren't open for a few weeks.
Okay. All right. So that's fine. So I will send them the select board, a couple of notes. One that we would, I'll get the language from Sue, but essentially that we would prefer if they would hold off making any changes in terms of reconsidering the vote that we did as a TRICOM until we meet. And also that we will be working to prepare some recommendations for budget adjustments that should be made in preparation for reductions in revenue going into FY21.
Hey, Matt, in order to help the finance committee with that, would it make sense to have a sub-working group get together to look at the budget and some options to bring back to a full finance committee meeting for considerations? And I think sometimes it helps having the stuff in front of you to make decisions instead of trying for the committee to do it line item by line item. I see Barry's already started. So that'd be a recommendation. Maybe have a little subgroup get going on that.
Barry,
Okay.
Barry is no.
No, you don't want to do
Barry's
that.
no.
It's a great idea to do that. Yes, I encourage everybody else to do that.
So I'll sign up for that subcommittee. That makes sense. Does anybody disagree with the subcommittee? I think, yeah, rather than the full committee trying to go through it in a meeting, if we put together a subgroup that makes some recommendations that can be reviewed by the committee, that probably is a more efficient way to get through, the budget.
So I'd like to work on that with you, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, you can count me in.
All right, Irene, you got it. All right, we can only have one more. Colleen, you're in. Okay, very good. We have our FY21 budget recommendation subcommittee then. Of course, if there's any inputs that anybody in the committee has, just send those to me and I'll incorporate them into our discussion. I certainly don't want to exclude anybody, and we'll discuss the recommendations going forward in one of our upcoming meetings. Yes, Barry.
All of this will go away when UPS launches their building.
Yeah.
And now follow the logic. Everything is being shipped now. I have FedEx, UPS, USPS, Prime, Amazon Prime. They're all my neighbor across the street. I don't know what the heck he's into, but he gets a truck or two every day. And there's a couple other down the street. I can't see how UPS could lose money in this environment.
All right, maybe you're right.
Build more.
Could
Hey,
be.
Matt, I have to check out. I have a selectmen's meeting I have to get ready for, so.
No worries. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, good luck, everybody.
We'll do it.
Bye.
Thank you.
Safe.
Bye,
Bye.
Mark.
All right.
Bye.
So that's the agenda, the end of the agenda. Does anybody have any additional commentary on any of those? Yes, Sue.
I just wanted to know, has Tim been making adjustments to our FY21 budget?
I've had one adjustment, which is the BVT assessment came in a little bit higher. I can
Great.
send that along to the finance committee. I asked a couple of questions, but obviously they're pretty busy and I didn't get any answers on that. They have reduced the cemetery, parks and cemetery budget by, I don't know what the exact number is, but by 2 part-time positions. Go ahead, Sue, take yourself off mute.
Okay.
No, you're
You're
still
still
on mute.
Muted.
There
Okay,
you
go ahead, Sue.
There you go.
I think it's a little over 6,
A little bit, yeah.
two part-time workers, which is summer help.
Yep. So that's the only adjustment that I've been made aware of, Sue. Other than that, I think it's the file that we were looking at all along.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second,
Moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
out of order.
So let's do a roll call vote for that.
Cool.
Barry, aye.
Heather,
Roy, I.
Kusher, aye.
Aye.
Often aye. Very good. Thank you
Thompson, aye.
for, all right, we are adjourned. Motion
okay,
carried.
thank you.